Yeah, it's interesting. People think that when you're diagnosed with a disease, hi Denise, when you're diagnosed with a disease, they feel like that's the worst part. And really, before you even get to that disease, there's a whole journey, like it's like a marathon of different doctors trying to figure out what's wrong with you. And you quickly learn who you never want to go to again. I've been with doctors who talk to my husband and asked if I had anxiety issues instead of looking at me, and so I wouldn't go to those doctors again. And so the big battle is finding a doctor that looks you in the eye and talks to you and listens to you. So once I found a doctor like that, he wasn't into technology and apps. Maybe it was the incentives that made him open to it and try it, but because Medicare and Medicaid, one of them offers up to 65,000 American dollars for them to incorporate it into their medicine. The other is, I think, 45,000 American dollars. But since then, he'll look at my phone and then we'll play, and I'll show him different things on the phone, and he'll show me a cool new app. So we've definitely grown together with it because I was very wary of apps as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a nice relationship.
Marie, let's have Renza speak while we get some technical things resolved with Jamie.
Okay, okay, sure. Renza, hi. Just to repeat the question again, would you say that some doctors see the informed patient as a challenge to their authority and expertise and health technologies?
I think that is the case, unfortunately. I know that, and when I was looking for a new doctor and interviewing new doctors, it was one of the questions that I had was, talk to me about what you're comfortable with using in terms of technology, and in our relationship, how can we communicate and how are you going to be happy to do that? But also, what do you use and what are you comfortable using? And I think that having that dialogue early on is really, really important because it sets the ground rules, and it made it very clear what I was looking for and what I was hoping to find. But I think that there really is a lot of and I do say suspicion, and I think that that's probably the right word, because it's simply a matter of a lot of healthcare professionals not being aware what's available and what's out there and what they can use, and it's always a little bit nerve-wracking at first when you're not sure, and it's always fascinating to meet with and speak with healthcare professionals who are really embracing the technology and hearing their story about how they went from I'm not touching this can't work, to actually that this is a really, really comfortable and safe and useful way to communicate with people.
And I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of perhaps Renza, or sorry, that Jamie hadn't come through there, but I really, if it didn't come through, just to repeat what she said, I really liked what she said about working with her doctor so that she would show the doctor, look at this app, and the doctor would look at the app, and then the doctor would show her something else. And again, it's going back to, it's not a them or us, it's that collaborative, and really that's the way we need to move. And also you touched on the same point again, which I think is so important. At the very start of the doctor-patient encounter is to establish how much each is comfortable with the new health technologies, and how much they want that to be part of the relationship. So I think we really need to get that message out there that we need to start moving more towards that. And again, then we won't have that maybe power play that's going on, which is, are you holding something back? Are they holding something back? So we need to kind of try to bring things more on a level playing field. Denise, any thoughts on this? Do you see that doctors feel that the patient that is digitally literate and comes along with their apps and their Google printouts? Again, I suppose maybe you did answer this in the sense that specialists are more perhaps open to this than the general practitioners. Have you any more thoughts on this?
Yes, this is a multifactorial problem. It begins with who are the physicians, what profile is being selected. For example, I've noticed that some medical schools in the U.S. are evolving toward the idea of having multiple interviews with medical student candidates to see whether they are people persons. To have them have more of a humanities background and not just be good with numbers and memorization. That is one part of it. Another is, as I mentioned, providing economic incentive to, which currently is backwards, because in most situations, other than what you call the concierge medicine that's becoming popular in certain places around the world, most physicians are encouraged by the system to go as quickly as possible to have the shortest conversation and go on to the next. It's not their fault. That's the way the system is set up. So they want to do it. They want to give closed answers rather than open answers. When you ask a physician, "How are you?" it's one word, "Fine," and on to the next thing. They're not there to talk with you. So it's a multifactorial thing. What's great is that this kind of conversation that we're having, the few of us here, didn't exist a few years ago. As soon as there would be the word internet, I'd be sitting in these physician or other professional populated auditoriums where there weren't any patients, and the physicians would be talking about this thing, what do you do with those patients that come in with the printouts? And there's that famous like New Yorker cartoon with the lady yelling at her doctor. It's always a male patient, a male physician, and the female patient yelling at him. And
that is true.
Yeah, and here we are. We would have had one male patient with us this evening, but he was unable to attend. And when we did the similar hangout in French, it was also females discussing this, and it's quite often this stereotypical. But we could have had the reverse. We could have had male patients and female physicians.
Okay, thank you. So my next question is, for those that embrace this changing paradigm, how do you think the new technology is enhancing? Let's move towards enhancement, the patient-provider collaboration. And my second question is, do you think this actually affects the treatment outcome, or does it just affect the relationship? So Renza, perhaps have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that part of being able to broaden that relationship so that there is more contact, and I like to think that one of the beautiful side effects of that is that you develop a more open and honest relationship with the person that you're seeing. And I think that from there, in terms of diabetes, because there's so much judgment in diabetes, it's one of the things, it's all about numbers, and we refer to numbers as good and bad, and this is a bad blood sugar reading, or this is a good blood sugar reading, and being able to move away from using that sort of language, which happens, I think, when you have that more regular contact and you've developed this relationship. I think that it leads to people being a little bit more open and honest about what's going on. So I think that the outcome of that actually could be improved treatment outcomes. There's still a significant number of people with diabetes who walk into their medical appointment and the first thing that their health professional says is, "Okay, let me see your numbers," and they expect for them to either be written in a book or they'll have a printout, and and there are many stories, and health professionals still love talking about this at conferences, of people with diabetes sitting in their waiting rooms and writing in numbers and making them up. But the question around that actually isn't, are these numbers real? The question is why do people feel the need to do that? And I think that comes back to the judgment and everything. So anything that can foster a relationship where people are more honest and more open, I think is only a really good thing. And I certainly do believe that is one of the side effects, if you like, of being able to use these sorts of technologies.
By the way, Marie, we've got some questions from people we know. There is a male patient who's asked some questions, so I'm going to post a question that he asked. He asked 2 questions. Do you see that?
What's his name?
So that's Michael Weiss, and he will be joining us in June at Doctors 2.0 and You, and he's probably right now in New Jersey. And he writes, I believe everybody sees this. A well-known social media physician, Kevin MD, once told Michael that he envisions the future of medicine to represent e-health, m-health, and healthcare social media in the physician's exam room. Do you agree? And would that be a good thing?
Would anybody like to argue back with it, Jamie?
Can you? I think I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think I might have misunderstood.
Okay, so Michael Weiss, who's involved in Crohn's disease, says that a well-known social media physician named Kevin who has a blog, told him that the future of medicine would be for e-health, mobile health, and social media to converge in the examination room. Is that a good idea?
Is that a good idea? Well, I think the convergence of the first two would be a great thing, but you know, even with social media, I guess that could be cool. You know, I mean, really big companies, big pharmaceutical companies, are trying to reach out to their patients via social media platforms, and even patients there's an organization, Ehlers-Danlos. It's a syndrome with connective tissue, and this is an example where a group of mothers were so fed up with the pain that their children were in. So feeling helpless and hopeless, they organized a group on Facebook, and from that, the patients started to learn who knew about this very rare condition and who didn't. So this one doctor had it right, and he was really helping. So people were telling other patients and their moms on Facebook and their parents, dads too, to go to this guy. This guy knows it all, blah, blah, blah. And from that, they've learned so much, and now they're opening up 2 clinics. And this guy is sort of heading it and teaching other people about the disorder. So I guess in that way, you could bring social media into the room, the practicing medicine room. You know, it starts before there, you know, but figuratively speaking, it helps, you know, because with the knowledge they learn from that and from people organizing and teaching each other, simply from the patient-to-patient relationship that extends to doctors, that extends to them learning more about the condition, and then, so yeah, absolutely.
And we actually have a response from another person. That it's in the form. It's written as a question, but it's a response from another patient. So Christine Bienvenue, who's in Switzerland, and she's a cancer survivor. So she writes that she agrees with Jamie, and I think she'd agree with Michael, that we can help the physician along, not actually put the finger on the diagnosis so as to avoid insulting them. Let the physician feel like he's come up with the idea, but just push him in the right direction.
Exactly. It's all in the approach.
I'd love to know if there's any physicians or healthcare professionals listening in, so that this conversation isn't too skewed towards the patient, because I mean we're talking about collaborative as well. So I'd like to encourage, if anybody's listening in, if you're on the Hangout or if you're on Twitter listening in, we'd really love to hear from you, because really the point that I would most like to make, and I'm sure I speak for the panel as well, is that we really don't want it to be a them or us situation. We really want this to be collaborative, and so we'd love to hear from you. Jamie, I liked what you were saying about the, I absolutely agree with you, the social media, and just perhaps to add to a little bit of something to that, perhaps maybe social media not necessarily so much in the examination room or in the consulting room, but to prepare the ground, to help you be more informed, and very much so to be a support after the consultation, because really I think that's where social media in particular, I know we're talking about health technologies, but I think that social media in particular has a huge role to play after the diagnosis, to support, and in particular, patients are wonderful, absolutely wonderful at knowing the things that perhaps a doctor doesn't necessarily know. So maybe the psychosocial aspect, how to cope with something that might not be life-threatening, but certainly has a huge difference to the quality of life. And I see that social media has such an important role to play in that. Renza, did you want to add something to that?
Absolutely. Or? You know, that's what started. I lost you.
Jamie, I'll just see if Renza wanted to add something to that, or and you can come and back join us. Renza, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that actually that's one of the great things, is that there are so many learning opportunities, obviously for the patient, but also for healthcare professionals. I know that, I often say to diabetes professionals, if you want to know the issues that are really affecting people with diabetes, read patient blogs, because that's where we're incredibly really honest. And with the diabetes online community, there are some incredible stories out there that really tell it like it is. And they're probably things that a lot of people wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily speaking with their doctor about. A lot of it is around the quality of life stuff, but also, you know, that motivation. How do I avoid burnout when I have this chronic health condition that is so demanding? It's like a petulant 3-year-old. How do I maintain the level of care that, you know, that the doctor, I guess, that would like to see, but also that I feel comfortable with. And also, I mean, things like tweet chats are absolutely another really great way. And I always, encourage healthcare professionals to join in or at least lurk, because what you can learn from there is huge. It really is just such an opportunity to hear what people are thinking and saying and what the real issues are. And, it is time. There is, we know we get into our appointments and we get out there. There isn't the opportunity to sit there necessarily and have a really long conversation, but an hour-long tweet chat can reveal an incredible amount. So, I think that there are great opportunities there.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that the amount of information about the lived experience, so not just about the diagnosis, but how do you live with the diagnosis afterwards, all that information is absolutely there in the blogs and in the tweet chats, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
we have,
I just
another
wondered,
question.
Oh, yes, Denise.
Yes, it's lovely because it's another future speaker, Kathleen Poulos in the United States. She writes,
Hi, Kathleen.
as there are more and more digital natives, medicine will need to keep up with this and embrace it, how the digital natives interact and communicate. And otherwise there will be missed opportunities and less than desirable patient outcomes. So we haven't spoken about the digital natives.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe hi, Kathleen. It's lovely to have you here. I have some thoughts on that. I think that perhaps with the digital natives, we might need to do a little bit different training. So I have seen maybe that we need to work on the how do you interact professionally. So this is bringing up something maybe about the professional use of social media, because when it comes so instinctively to you, the barriers are a little bit more blurred. So that's a whole other topic, a whole other subject that perhaps we might have another conversation about. But Renza, have you or Jamie any thoughts on digital natives and how this affects them, or what contribution they are going to make in the future?
Can you define what you mean by digital natives for me?
I'm guessing that it's that I am not a digital native. I'm somebody from a generation that this is all very exciting and very new to me. I'm still absolutely blown away by the power of social media and new health apps. But there are a whole generation that have grown up with it, and this is instinctive to them, and it's just totally natural, and so it's native. They are the digital natives, and that's my understanding. So
okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, so I suppose the question is, we've been talking here about those that are less than we've been talking about perhaps physicians and healthcare professionals that are not familiar with the new health technologies and the social media, and so this is all a new area. But how do you see those that have grown up with it and that are familiar with it? How do you see the future affecting the patient-provider relationship there?
Well, I think that I spoke a little bit to that before. My personal doctor, my MS specialist, wasn't open at all to even smartphones, but where I was, and then we had the incentive programs for Medicare and Medicaid for them to use electronic health records, and, I would show him, like, the different doctor apps, and we would explore things, and he's come around. It's like anything else. It evolves slowly, and it's a partnership, and I think it depends on how we approach that. In the beginning, I think when people were Googling their symptoms and taking it in and diagnosing themselves before they met a doctor, the doctors felt threatened by that. But now, when we share apps, there are so many wonderful. I think there are about 80 apps that doctors typically use right now that are very, very important to what they're doing. And I see how, in the 5 years that I've worked with my doctor, how he's grown. And we laugh about it, and we share, and we talk about it. And another thing is that they're considering doing is doctors won't just be prescribing medications. They're going to be prescribing apps for their patients. there are many articles on the best, like 10 apps that the doctors use. Like iTriage is #1. There are many, Renza, on diabetes, tracking glucose, and all of those. But another big part of this is going to be doctors prescribing apps for their patients to use to help the doctor, which is good, you know? People come around.
No.
I just wanted to make some more comments from the audience here. We have somebody we know who, Beat Bardes from France, who's saying hello to Marie and enjoying the discussion. We have a French student, resident in general practice, who has been enjoying listening to this and saying that there were issues with the whole physician-patient and the internet in France. And then we had an interesting remark from I'm not sure if it's Kathleen or Michael, saying that, talking about interviewing a new doctor. It's Michael. Interviewing a new doctor is a respectful thing for a patient to do, because then they can understand right off whether they're going to collaborate effectively together.
Yes, good point.
Yeah.
I think that's one of...
Yeah, Renza.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that is a really critical part of establishing that relationship, is being really open and honest and, you know, thinking about what's important to you. We've got to remember that there actually are still some patients out there who do want a relationship with a doctor where they walk in and they are told, this is what you need to do, and then they will go home and do that. They don't want it to be a discussion. They don't want necessarily to be able to question, but why are you saying that? They're quite happy to have the sort of doctor who will be quite prescriptive, and that works. But for people who that's not okay and who are looking for something a little bit more collaborative and consultative, well, then, you know, sitting down and saying, this is what I'm looking for. One of the things that I always would ask is, tell me about the conferences that you've been to recently. Because one of the things that I wanted to know was, is this the sort of doctor who does go to conferences? Is it the cutting edge of what's going on? You know, have you published anything recently? All of these sorts of questions used to be the questions that I would ask, and now I still do, but I add to that, talk to me about, can we email each other? You know, it can be as simple as that. Can I email you in between our visits if I have something that I need to say, or a question that I have, or, you know, tell me what you think about the fact that I blog. Obviously, I'm not going to be writing your name and talking about you specifically, but how do you feel about the fact that I use that platform to talk about diabetes? And I think that that's you know, we have that opportunity to do that, and doing it at the get-go, I think, can only mean that you know, you're going to know, is this the right doctor for me or not?
So a couple of more things. Kyle Rose, whom you all know, who spoke about diabetes last year, said that the whole them versus us, which I guess we were talking about earlier, is an issue in countries where there's been for too long one-directional communication, such as in France. And Beat was saying that it's no longer, it's not just about printouts, it's now about coming in with your self-tracking apps. So that's even a further affront to certain kinds of professionals, making it harder to find them. So 2 comments that are really one comment, because both of those people live in France.
Yes, and I thank you, Renz. I really like what you're saying about that we know that we establish that relationship. I think that's a hugely important point. Sometimes, I mean, the idea of this conversation at the start was talking about new health technologies, but we've kind of moved more towards relationship. But I think that's okay, because what I really feel is relationships come before the technologies. So we need to establish that basis first, and we are talking about a shift in the doctor-patient relationship, and in that paradigm that Denise mentioned. I think it was Beata who said that the one-directional. So we're moving away from that them and us, the one-directional, to something that's more participatory and that's more collaborative. So we need to establish that basis first, and that grounding needs to be there before we come in with the health technologies. So I really loved what Renza said about, before we go any further with this, you know, where do you stand on this? This is where I stand, and can we work together on that? I think that's a really terrific point. Jamie, you mentioned your doctor and how open your doctor is to the new health technology, and I wonder if can Renzo or Denise, do we have any other examples of shining examples of physicians that are active and offering to complement the relationship with Web 2.0 tools or apps?
We've had some amazing examples at the conference over the years. As soon as you said that, those Dutch guys came right to mind. I always call them the Dutch guys, but Dr. Bart Brandenburg and his counterpart, they stopped because they realized they either had to go forward and do a lot more with it or stop. But they did tweet chats for physicians, so they called it tweet consultation in Dutch, for specific hours during the day. And they told, I love this story about the woman that sent in a photo saying that she had some issue with her neck, but it had nothing to do with what Bart saw, which was a lesion that needed to be observed. And so he said to her that there was something that she should look at with her physician, and possibly saved her life. So they did very well with it. They got on TV, and it was just like the idea of these two Dutch guys. So yes, there are physicians that embrace this.
Yes, and I will say that from my own experience, if you go to Doctors 2.0, you'll certainly see the cream of the crop there, and that's really where you learn who's really pushing the envelope and who's really out way ahead with that. I saw some very exciting things last year. I suppose I'm actually coming up to my last question here for the panel, so that we can maybe take some more questions from Twitter. And my last question is, what one piece of advice would you give to physicians to help them prepare for a future where patients are empowered by new technologies? Renza, what advice would you give?
I'd say don't be scared. I'd start with that. This is not really scary. It's really not. I know that it seems that it's huge and it's big and it's impossible to control, and you know, who's moderating this? And you know what? They're actually all the really good things, to tell you the truth. The fact that it is big and there are lots of people talking about things, and it isn't, you know, I think that the first thing I would say is don't be scared. Dip your toe in gently and have a go. And I would also say, you know, it's really interesting because one of the criticisms that we constantly get about, for example, social media and healthcare is it's not moderated, you know. But we're an incredibly, amazingly smart group of people, and there is a lot of self-moderation going on, and I think that that's part of it. You know, if somebody came out and said, okay, I can cure your diabetes, all you need to do is go and stand in the sun for 20 minutes a day on one leg and, you know, drink water that's been brewing somewhere, everybody would just shut them down straight away. So I think there needs to be a real acknowledgement by healthcare professionals that the patient isn't stupid, that this is not trying to take over traditional healthcare. It is not trying to replace the doctor-patient relationship. It is augmenting that, and there is a place within it for healthcare professionals. So find that place.
And Michael Weiss is addressing Renza and has just said, brilliant. Doctors in New York City would want to hire you to run their practice. A patient helping to run a medical practice makes sense.
Michael, can you get me a job? I've been to New York 3 times in 3 years. I want to move there. Find me a job and I will move over there immediately.
Again, I really like, Renza, that we're coming back to this point again, and it's not about replacing, it's not about the them and us situation, it's about how can we work together. And just what you were saying there, it just came into my mind. For research, Gunther Eisenbeck has done some research, and that's available on the internet, about the degree of, he calls them apomediatories, is that, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but that we have, and again, we have this idea of the patient as an expert. So the doctor is an expert in the disease, but the patient is the expert in how the disease affects them. So it's what the micro-expert idea as well. So it's a different shift. It's not necessarily somebody knows more than the other. It's a shift. It's a coming together. Jamie, the question is again, what advice would you give any physicians to help them prepare for the future where patients are more informed and they are more empowered by new technologies? You'd agree with Renza?
Yes, I think that, you know, if the doctor keeps in mind that great quote from the Harvard professor, Dr. Charles Sagrin, where he says the most underutilized resource in medicine is that we do not utilize is the patient. I think once the healthcare provider understands that this is a supplement that can sort of bridge that gap, it's a very direct line to more information about the patient. It's a great supplement. It's not a replacement. It's a supplement. And
I have to throw in my quote from one of my favorite physicians, not a personal physician, but the man who invented the IT system for the Veterans Health Administration. And he said the patient is the first member of the medical team.
And that's wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's wonderful.
I'm going to write that one down.
Yes, and yes, surprisingly, I haven't heard that one before. I have heard Charles Safran's, which I really like, and Ronnie Zagor's the community of micro experts. So that's a terrific one to add to the canon. And the other one about the patient empowerment and the patient engagement being the blockbuster drug of the century. Denise, you've worked with you're really at the coalface there between patients and physicians and health IT, and what's your pearl of wisdom for anybody?
I don't have a sentence like that one. I borrowed that guy's sentence, but I have come to a conclusion that for as long as we are in this era of medicine, because I believe we're on the edge of the next era with the genetic approach, but as long as we're in this current way of doing things with drugs and surgery and not enough prevention, I think that what really is lacking is a complement between the use of traditional IT and the use of individual initiative. If you look at traditional IT is large systems and it has to go slowly. It's very expensive to move an inch of it or to change everything and get a new one. And then you have individual initiative that can grow up overnight and change and start and stop, and those are all the communities and the apps and the serious games and the blogs. They're low investment for many of them, although of course some apps are complex. And at the current time, we really need both, because if everybody gets on their different app and blog and community and there's no basic IT network making it possible to bring all that together, there's going to be a lot of loss. And vice versa. If we only have the traditional organization, even if it becomes perfectly wired, without the input and the fast pace of these individual initiatives, it will be lost. What's fascinating for me is seeing that quite often these initiatives are limited by national borders. People try to solve a problem that happens in their country because of the way medicine is set up there. And so we have actually hundreds and thousands of interesting ideas that one could put together.
That's a great point, and actually I noticed that Susanna Fox on one of her latest blogs was about health hacking, and it's about how do we get all those little nuggets, those little gems of information that we need. How do we get that information, and how do we contribute? How do we collaborate with that information? I mean, that's at a different level. It's not at the technical level, I suppose, in a sense, but again, it's all part of the same thing. I'm just having a quick look at Twitter here to see if anybody has any questions. One moment now, I don't see anything coming in.
Is there any more questions? Been more coming from the people on the Hangout.
Yeah, great.
That pretty much, we've had a lot of compliments, people saying, "Amen, Renza," to every word, or Michael saying that this is a really good way to encourage physicians, and Bayad Bartas pointing out that depending on the generation, there are different issues within what we've been discussing.
I agree. So, yes, I agree.
Right. So everybody has contributed to this.
And that's wonderful. And just myself being the Twitter advocate that I am, I just wanted to check, but I don't see anything else coming in there.
And we have a French young doctor who has written in that he totally agrees the patient is the first resource, is not used enough. As a new doctor, I hope new technologies will help us informing, advising patients. They have to take the decision. Karim Sandi, this is somebody we don't know, who hasn't been to the conference, and who has found out about this through social media, and who clearly wants to answer the question that we had from Kyle about what do you do in a in a culture where things are mono-direction, well, here's a guy who wants to change things. So
That's
thank you,
terrific.
Corinne.
That's terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any closing thoughts as we're winding down this conversation? Denise, have you any other closing thoughts that you would like to finish with? Or
well, I like you. I'm not a digital native, and I find it fascinating. Remind us, Jamie, what city you're in right now?
I'm about 20 minutes outside of New York City.
Okay, so we've had New York, 2 Australian cities that are far enough away from each other that they're not even on this exactly same time zone.
Yeah,
I know, that's crazy.
And myself here in Paris with Laura, who's been coordinating the technical side in the background, and then of course we don't know who all the people are, but somebody from the south of France, and Kathleen in the U.S., and Michael also in New Jersey. You'll meet each other in Paris, you New York, New Jersey persons.
Renza, you can come stay with me when you want to come to New York City for that.
So
the house is yours.
Yeah, despite the issues.
Later this year, then.
Okay.
Yeah. Despite the issues that we had with the echoing, and we're sorry for anybody who was upset by that at the beginning, this has been a really great conversation for which some people got up really early, other people stayed up very late, and it's been very participatory. And we're not going to solve these problems, but it's very important to talk about them and look at them as opportunities.
Sure, sure. Can I say one thing before we end?
Of course, Jamie.
You could say 2 things.
I wanted to point out, you know, we talk about the patient to doctor relationship, you know, in e-health and social media, but you know, as a patient, I just want to urge other patients to use social media as a platform to not only to get information, but to speak out about their problems and to find other patients like them that have similar issues, and to organize. Like, social media is such a great tool to organize. If you're not getting the answers and you're searching for some diagnosis or whatever, it's a really powerful tool for the patient, and it's empowering, and being empowered is healing. So
I agree. I absolutely agree, and I agree with you, Jamie. And just on that point, I'd just like to maybe speak to those that are a little bit. We're talking about the physicians that are perhaps a bit reluctant to join in the conversations, but we need to remember as well that at the start, patients may not be quite ready for it also. So Renza mentioned earlier the word that I wish we had another word for Renza. Lurking always sounds quite quite strange, doesn't it? But I absolutely agree with you. Perhaps we'll say listening in. So a great place to start is by listening in to this kind of Google Hangout, and I know there's going to be plenty more of them. You don't have to say anything; just listen and learn, and gradually, your confidence will build. So I'd always like to say that to people who kind of feel like we weren't. It's a very important point. I'm sure that Renza and that Jamie will agree with me. We weren't born to be vocal e-patients. It's something that didn't happen overnight. It's something that happened because of a health crisis and a need to feel a little bit more in control. But it's something that happened gradually. I don't think there's anybody today who is suddenly this informed patient. We learn as we go along, and we learn from those that came before us. So that would be my advice to patients, to anybody listening in. Learn from those that have come before. Don't feel intimidated, and again with the physicians as well. You know, learn from those that are doing it right. Listen in, see what the conversations are, and bit by bit your confidence grows, and bit by bit you join. But absolutely, I don't think this happens overnight. Renza, would you agree with me on that?
Absolutely, and I think that you know, for a lot of people, it actually doesn't come naturally being, you know, the assertive patient or assertive in any way whatsoever. But I think that taking it very slowly, and one of the things that I have found about the diabetes community is that it is a very open and welcoming online community generally, and so I know that lurking's not a great word, but it is a great way to learn. I would absolutely encourage people with a very, just as I said for healthcare professionals, a gently and a slowly approach. It's the same for people who are, for the patients. It's a great way to learn. And also, I think that, we've been talking about this in terms of the doctor-patient relationship, and but it's also such an important way to develop your peer support network. And I think that that's probably what personally I have found has been, in terms of social media, has been the most valuable thing for me, is not ever feeling isolated and alone living with a health condition that can be so isolating at times. There is real power in the community there.
Well, I think that's a really wonderful way to end this, to end our conversation. So I'd like to say thank you so much, Renza, and thank you very much, Jamie, and of course, Denise. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing, bringing us all together in one place. So I was almost said good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. So thank you to everybody who's joined us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.